Wish I had a really amazing intro into the conversation that we're gonna have today, and I don't. So that's okay. So I want to go into a really exciting topic if you're open to looking at it that way. So I don't know who needs to hear this, but someone needs to hear it because it's coming through me. So the reason your sexual shame matters, the reason your sexual experience or trauma matters. So alongside with my overcoming 2 divorces at the age of 26 to help you empower yourself, to help you love yourself, to help you come home to you, to help you be whole again, to feel that way. Alongside with that was me overriding and overcoming the experiences that I had with sexual trauma and sexual abuse. And most people, I recognize, would never go just post this online and then just let it be what it is, because it's just an open story and everyone has access to YouTube. But cool, like, what makes us human is our ability to relate. And what makes us human is telling the truth so that other people can come into that space and then realize that there are conversations being had about it. It is being talked about. It can be talked about. It can liberate you. And by the way, it's really important to deal with. So I want to help you understand shame and how that shame relates to relationships. So if you've got shame, I want you to imagine that you're like in a relationship with someone and it's like this, okay? If I have shame that I don't want you to see, it is my job to build a wall tall enough to build the shame in order to cover the shame, right? Like if I have a pile of crap that I don't want you to see, I'm gonna make sure that I build a wall so that you can't see over the wall and actually see like what's behind that wall, because if you saw that pile of crap, I'm convinced that you wouldn't be here, right? A lot of psychologists call this a shadow, right? There's a lot of good books on this. In fact, I'll make a description and link below on how you can read more about this. But the idea is that if you have so much shame, and shame is just an emotion that convinces you that you shouldn't talk about something, you shouldn't admit something. Shame keeps you locked up in the closet that you're actually keeping it in. So if I'm in a relationship with you, or you're in a relationship with me and you have shame, you're gonna naturally build a wall to make sure that I only see what you want me to see, or vice versa. Because if you peek over that wall and you see all of the other crap behind me and all of that stuff in there, like that, shame says if they saw that, it would mean I'm not lovable, I'm not enough, or I'm not worthy. Shame is the part of the brain that says, don't talk about it, stay silent, shut your mouth, this is not acceptable, and the experience shouldn't have happened. The lie we tell ourselves is that it shouldn't have happened, but reality says it did. So my reality was that at 13 years old, I was sexually traumatized and abused, and not just by a close family member, but also from a family member's close friend. So I had this experience and it perpetuated the way I did relationships quite literally until I figured out what was going on with me at age 25 when I had my second divorce. And that shame was really heavy. I carried it in my body. And you know you'll carry shame because a lot of your experiences you keep to yourself. Like you're like, oh, I would never tell someone that. I would never ever admit that. And here's why I admit it, because it wasn't mine to carry. Shame also convinces you that it's yours to carry. So I had this belief because of shame that it was my fault. Like, what did I do? Like, I was 13 years old. Like, do you know what consciousness someone has at 13 years old? They're still figuring life out, right? Like they're just barely entering puberty most of the time, trying to figure out like, what's this, right? Like they're learning their body. And so I felt disconnected from my body. And then I learned to do relationships that same way. And not even just sexually and intimately. I learned to disconnect from being in my body, because in the moment when that experience happened, I left. And I know that sounds like a weird, crazy thing to talk about, but disassociation is when you're not in the present moment. Disassociation is like, okay, you can be talking to me, we can be having a conversation, and I'm not here. I'm not present, I'm not focused, I'm not listening, I'm somewhere else, I'm imagining something else, I'm not in my senses, okay? So call it your body, your senses. Disassociation protected me in that moment because I wasn't willing to feel what was actually happening. And a lot of times we either fight, like you guys have heard of flight or fight. We either do that or we freeze. And a lot of times we don't even know that we're doing it. So when I froze, I disassociated from that sexual trauma. And that sexual trauma was so big that I I actually continued doing my relationships this way. In fact, I was 13 and I thought it was normal. And that's another thing shame does. Shame convinces you that you're the only one that's going through it. And for women that are watching this, if you've been sexually abused or you're being sexually abused or you're really disconnected from your body, breathe. Just breathe. It's not your fault. And I'm going to give you space for shame to come out because I've been through it and I can tell you the disassociation helped you in that moment, but it's no longer serving you now. So what happened to you doesn't have to be the reason that you choose to be a victim to it. In fact, you're a freaking badass. And I'm so okay with saying that because you just are. Like, you survived it and you're not dead. And the evidence says that you have a story to tell. And I'm obviously okay with my experience because I've processed it and I felt through it and I cried and got over it. And it's just a part of the journey. And now I can tell you because someone is going to need to hear my message. Disassociation served you because you weren't willing to feel it in the moment. But now you're an adult. And now you're trying to connect with real people. And when you're in a relationship or a marriage even, there is the part that comes up again, which is the sexual experience or the intimacy. And if you're not connected with you, you'll learn to have disassociated sex. You'll learn to be disassociated, not in your body, not in your senses, and learn to get in your head. Another great way to explain that is you're crawling inside of your head and you're not allowing yourself to feel. I have a lot of women, tell me if you're this person, who says, I just don't know how to feel. Actually, you do. You do know. You're just terrified. See, that seems more true than you just don't feel, because that's a freaking lie. We all feel, but we have heart walls, and we'll talk about that later. Heart walls are literally the thing that you have built to protect you from going through the experiences that you have been through, and it was very necessary. And now it's a pattern and program that needs to be released. Releasing things by nature can be very scary. Like, if you've only known one way, and then to just say, let it go, you're like, but at least, I mean, it's painful, but at least I know it, right? Like, I know what the pain feels like. And that was really crappy. So I'd get into relationships and I didn't know how to be intimate. Like, I was literally in a marriage and I didn't know how to be intimate. By intimate, I meant any kind of vulnerability, any kind of intimacy. I was really dang good at masculine though. Like, I'll make the money, I'll do the bills, I'll do this. And like, so infatuated with my big, large ego and my mask, because I had learned to disassociate, crawl inside of my head, overthink, overwork, burn out, and then learn to get my worth and my value through the outside world through my career. And that career led me to, 10 years in sales and communications. That was awesome, cool. But I had to get past the old pattern where I was not allowing myself to be vulnerable. Like, yeah, I was sexually abused at 13 years old by someone that I actually was really close to. And I went through that more than once, and I didn't tell really anybody. And then I got into relationships where cheating was happening and more sexual things still kept coming up, and I still wasn't dealing with it. And here's the truth about shame. When you talk about it, when you just openly talk about it, that alone gives no environment for shame to live. See, the only reason it can continue growing is because you've kept it in this nice little petri dish in an environment where it can continue to spread. The more shame that you allow to grow inside of that little petri dish, then it makes sense, right? Because it's going to continue to evolve, because it's got you. It actually owns you. You're not free. So when you get into relationships that are crappy for you and you consciously think that you're choosing it, you're not, because shame already has you under the hook that says if anybody saw that, you wouldn't be able to get a better partner. In fact, I attracted partners who would abuse me because sexual abuse and other forms of abuse were done at such a young childhood that I attracted what was familiar. Do you get what I'm saying? Let me say that again. I attracted what was familiar. Because to attract something healthy meant that I had to put on a mask. Again, we're in a relationship, and it was to continue building a wall high enough where, yeah, you could love me, kind of, but if you even started to see like any kind of that shame on the other side, then I was like terrified, right? So like I push you away, and most people do this, and we don't know we're doing it. I'm gonna push you away because that stuff back there is way too damaging. That stuff back there behind that closet, like, you're not going to be in this relationship, right? Because shame said you're not lovable. And that's a freaking lie. It's a freaking lie. So what's really cool after processing this is that you start to come back into your body and you start to feel alive again, and you start to have senses, and then you get to become intimate with yourself. And then you realize that all the things you've been taught about your sexuality and all the things you've been taught about the sexual abuse and all the things you've been taught that were wrong about you aren't yours at all. Like there's you, who's a creative, amazing spirit, a human being, or a being, like the being without the human part. And then the experience of the sexual assault and the sexual trauma and the sexual abuse was an experience. The only difference was that you took shame and made it yours. Well, what's wrong with me? What did I do to deserve this? What happens if someone finds out? Why would they do that to me, right? And then we start going into the thoughts, into the head of the why and the explanation. And I'm not saying don't be angry. In fact, I'm saying the opposite. If you're feeling it, thank gosh, because you're on the road to healing. You're not just thinking about it. You're no longer thinking, oh my gosh, like, why did they do that? And how did I survive that? And will it happen again? Now you're feeling. And it's normal to feel anger. It's normal to feel rage. And we're going to give you space to do that. But I'm excited for you because I used to be the person who couldn't find joy in explaining that process. And now I feel so much gratitude because I realize it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. Like it happened to my body. I was there, right? But I overcame that so that I could see actually the truth. And the truth is like, sexuality is beautiful and intimacy is sacred, and having that space where you can be present within your own body and no longer disassociate. It's amazing what floodgates of love come in, because if you build a wall that protects you from shame and all of the other garbage that you're hiding, what they don't tell you, and this is nasty, what they don't tell you is that the shame that's blocking you from all the other crap that you don't want seen is the same wall that reflects and repels the love. Like what doesn't get in doesn't get out. And that's so crazy because we think, well, I'm going to protect myself. You ain't protecting yourself, honey. You're hurting yourself. And that's crazy because we think we have the ability to control the wall, right? Like I'll higher it and then I'll lower it and then I'll higher it and then I'll lower it. But actually like nothing is getting into that heart space because you've decided to hold on to the experience so tightly, not to give it space to breathe. You're like, right? Imagine like trying to give a porcupine a freaking hug. You know, like you're like, I ain't touching her. Like that's what you're doing, even though you're not aware you're doing it, because you're trying to protect your heart and you were innocent in that moment. Innocent. So if you've been sexually abused or you've been sexually traumatized, I bring that up because it will impact your relationships, your current ones, your future ones, and your past ones. In fact, if someone would have been able to explain this to me from the get-go, I probably never would have had the experiences that I've had. And I'm grateful for them, right? But I wouldn't have been divorced twice, not by 26. I wouldn't have gone through that journey. But through the experiences I've had, now I'm relatable to the person who needs to hear this. It's not okay, but more importantly, it's not your fault. So I dare you to rise. If you need to find healing in this and you don't know what to do with it, I'll tell you the secret is not to keep talking about it. And that's the crazy thing. Therapy is going to tell you to just work through it and think about it and then go write them a letter, and then forgiveness. And forgiveness is a true fact of this, but the more that you focus on the problem, the more that you create the problem. There's actually a different process in how we help heal that, because your natural essence is already free. It's the meaning that you're assigning to the experience that causes your suffering. So if you want help on that, go to BrieMarie.com. It is BRIBRIMARIE.com. And I am so passionate about helping women, especially, come back into their bodies to gain confidence, again, to have healthy relationships. And you know what's funny? Is I haven't said this yet, but relationships aren't just with the things outside of us. So my question, and then I'll end it, is how successful and happy are you in the relationship with your body? So think about that. Tell me in the description below where you struggle with the relationship with your body. I also want to know if you've had any sexual trauma before. And if you have, let's talk about it. Like, I dare you to rise. I dare you to rise above the experience, rise above the shame, rise above the crap that's keeping you stuck. And let's use that same experience as a stepping stool. There's a huge difference between feeling stuck in the pressure and the shame of being put down versus like, oh, I see that that's there. Okay, like I'm just going to stand on it and then I'm going to rise. So I'm going to dare you to rise because you're worth it, and I'm excited. Let's see you in the next video.